Good evening. We're going to get started. Thank you so much for coming. Oh, we get clapping. That helps. We have shushing. Thank you. All right. But the shushing was involved. Thank you so much for joining us. Today is the 30th General Plan Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you so much for attending, both the GPAC members as well as the members of the public. For those of you watching at home, again, this is our 30th meeting, and I really wanted to thank everyone for attending. I want to welcome all of you. My name is Rachel Diamond. I'm the Community Development Director at the City of Ventura. This project has been in process for quite some time, so I know a lot of you have been hanging in there, so thank you for your participation. I want to acknowledge our chair and vice chair, Councilmember Doug Holter and Bill McReynolds, Mayor, excuse me, one more time, we're giving you all the titles today. Deputy Mayor Doug Halter and Councilmember Bill McReynolds, thank you so much. We also have Matt Ramey, our consultant, who's the main consultant for this project from Ramey and Associates. We also have Deepak Kaushik from Iteris, who is our mobility consultant who will be presenting to us today. We also have Jeff Hereford, who is our city's transportation planning manager, who is here as well to talk about mobility. And then we have Susan Harden from Circle Point, who is our facilitator of the meeting. So I will go ahead and turn it over to her. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to briefly go over a couple of points before we get started. One is just, first we'll do the agenda, I guess. So agenda tonight is really important. So we're going to start with a presentation on some of the outstanding land use items that were left from last meeting, and then go right into the mobility policy framework presentation. So we'll have both of those presentations provided to you, and then have some short time for Q&A. We want that to be relatively short because we really want to be able to dig into the action and discussion around the topics of both make those land use decisions as well as move into the small group discussion for the mobility policy framework. But we will stop there for some Q&A and then move into public comments. So the public will be able to provide comments on both of those topics, the land use and the mobility policy framework. Just a reminder for the public, there are some speaker cards. It does say written comment, but you don't have to write the written comments. You can just put your first name, last name on there, and I'll be able to call you up. So in between, if you want to bring me a card, please feel free to do that. But we will pause for public comment about 2 minutes per speaker, so that we can be sure to get into the meat of the discussion, hopefully by about 7 o'clock. When we move into the land use designation, we'll share with you some decision points, so some options that came out of the last meeting, or where you directed staff to come up with a couple of options. So we'll hopefully be able to take a vote on those and make a decision of what goes next to the City Council, as well as then break into the small groups to allow for you to kind of dig into the policy framework for mobility. Each small group will then share back some of your key points that you came out of your discussion, and then we'll have some additional final discussion there as well. And then finally, we wanted to round out tonight's meeting with coming back to the vision and core values. That piece, there were some recommended changes to that, so we want to kind of close the loop on that piece as well. And then we'll end our meeting at 8:30 promptly, as we generally try to do every meeting. And just reminding you of a couple of the protocols that we have in place for our meetings to keep things running smoothly and respectfully, and that is making sure that we show respect for all of the people in the room, both at the GPAC, the staff, as well as the public. We don't want any interruptions, so that applies to both our GPAC members, of course, but also to the public. So please, when people are speaking, we want them to be heard by the GPAC and by all the members of the public. And then, of course, the public comment piece that I already mentioned. And then I guess that's where I turn it over to Matt.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. It's been a year since we saw each other, or a month, however you want to count that. What we're going to do at the beginning of this is to finish up our land use designation and land use designation map conversation. And so what we would ultimately like is to get direction from the GPAC, final direction, so that we can move on to talking about mobility tonight, as well as then land use policy and public facilities and services, which is going to be on Wednesday night. So just a reminder to where we were at our meeting in early December. We presented the results of the public survey on the revised, updated round number, I can't remember, what number on the land use designation map and land use designations. We received 500 parcel-specific comments and 150 sort of broad general comments. We categorized those at the last meeting into 29 themes. At a higher level, like 29 specific areas, and if you'll remember, we walked through each one of those areas. You all had a chance to ask questions. These are the themes that we presented, and we came up with some of the decisions and direction. The decisions that were made were, first was that the GPAC voted in favor of 3 stories and 45 feet for the CTO, commercial tourist oriented, outside of the downtown. There was a question of where those are. And so this is the map showing the parcels that are CTO outside of the downtown. The downtown will remain what the downtown has as for height and density there. The second was for the Ventura River Trail. Don't have a map of this, but there was discussion about whether that should be park, which is what the land use designation map had, or whether it should not have a designation, and the GPAC voted in favor of removing the park designation from the trail, so it'll just really show up like a right-of-way, like any other roadway in the land use map. Then there was a long discussion about allowing residential in industrial areas. GPAC voted that staff should identify opportunities for this to happen and come back at this meeting, and so I'll talk about that in just a minute. There were a few topics that came up at the last meeting that got postponed to today, which is why we're starting on them. The first is the residential uses in the industrial designation. The second was the density and height around the Metrolink station. And then the third was that there were some shopping centers that were changed to commercial from neighborhood center by the city council. And just to be clear, that the 3 topics that were postponed to today are all topics that the council actually gave direction on and that this group wanted to discuss again. And so the idea is to get a sense of this group's direction for these 3 topics so we can kick that back to the council to see if the council would like to reconsider their decisions on those. So moving into these 3 areas. So what we're going to do is I'm going to walk through, it's just a couple of slides, but walk through the 3 topics. So the first is the land use designations for shopping centers. This GPAC had identified either mixed use 3 or mixed use or neighborhood center land use designation for these shopping centers that you see on the map here. The city council changed those to commercial because they wanted to make sure that just the commercial uses were preserved, and our 2 council members can maybe speak to that. So the options that we have before you, again, we're trying to move this, kind of make sure that we're getting discussion, but still keep moving this forward tonight. So we're going to present a couple options for each one. The first is to just keep the city council endorsed direction, which is that these should remain as commercial land use designations. The other is that the city council consider changing the designation of these to neighborhood center from commercial. The second is the Metrolink, what we call the Metrolink TOD, or Transit-Oriented Development Area. The area that we're talking about is what you see outlined both with the dotted lines in black and in red. And the GPAC, through your conversations, identified that both of these parcels should be mixed use 4, which is 4-story. Mixed use 4 is 4-story mixed use buildings. The city council changed that decision, or made a different decision, to have the westernmost parcel that you see in purple here be mixed use 3, which is 3 stories, and the eastern parcel to change it to light industrial flex in order to preserve the uses that are there. So this was, you had your direction, the council had a different direction, and it was a topic to come up again at the last meeting. And so the options to just maybe put them out there that we can get direction on are either to just keep the city council endorsed direction. The second is that to request that the city council change both of these parcels to mixed use 4, which is what you had said, and the council went a different direction, or to just have the westernmost parcel be changed to mixed use 4 and keep the light industrial flex on the easternmost parcel. So those are 3 options to consider. Then the next is allowing residential in industrial designations. This, to make it, and I'll just kind of get to the punchline here, which is that it's really complex for how that can happen. There are lots of factors that go into it, including where do you allow it, how much do you allow, how do you actually do the calculation? Is it based on building square footage? Is it based on the maximum FAR allowed? Is it based on the parcel area? So there's lots and lots of factors to be able to balance what I think this group was trying to do last time, which was to preserve the industrial uses while allowing some residential associated with it. And so we came up with a few ideas, but staff's recommendation ultimately is to keep, is to have a policy at a high level that says that industrial can be allowed and allow a further study along with the zoning in order to figure out really the how and the where with this in more specificity. Just because it is really complex for the multiple different ways, and we know it's really critical to maintain the jobs that you have and not have residential, but also to allow opportunities for housing in the city. So the first kind of broad question with this is where should residential uses be allowed? And there's a couple of options here. It can happen by land use designation, or it can happen by geographic area. And if it happens by geographic area, there would probably be an overlay, some sort of overlay zone overlay on top that says in this area residential is allowed. And so by designation, the most appropriate designation to allow it is really the light industrial flex 3 and 6. So not the general industrial, but the light industrial flex 3 and 6. If you look at it by area, there's different ways that you can do this. And again, this is where it starts getting really complex. So you could allow residential in the industrial areas on all or part of the west side. You could have it in the light industrial flex area of the Arundel area, or even the general industrial of the Arundel and North Bank area. You could allow it in the industrial uses in the Johnson corridor area near the Metrolink station. So there's lots of permutations and lots of options with this about how that works for what you want to achieve. Then there's the question of how much. So there's an approach to actually do a high-level policy that just says allow it and the details will be worked out in zoning. Or the other option to present is that we've actually gone through the process of figuring out if you're going to add residential to a commercial use, what that would be, and that's 40% of the parcel at up to 54 dwelling units per acre. So there are many other permutations. You think about 10%, 20%, 25%, but again, is that based on the parcel area? Is it based on the building area? There's lots and lots of options with this. And so what we want to do is really present 2 options to really consider this evening. The first option 1 includes high-level policies in the general plan with details in the zoning code. Both of them are going to require details in the zoning code. But the first one would add a statement to the light industrial flex 3 and 6 designations to say allow a small amount of residential uses in those designations. There would be a policy in the land use element essentially to the same effect, saying allow a limited amount of residential uses in industrial and employment areas in order to create live-work neighborhoods and provide additional housing for employees of Ventura businesses. Then an action to conduct the study either as part of or prior to zoning to hone in exactly on where, what, and how this would happen. Option 2 is to be more specific about the direction in the general plan, and that's where the first option here is to change the light industrial flex 3 and light industrial flex 6 designations to allow residential uses on 40% of the parcel and a maximum density of 54 units per acre on the residential portion of the site, and to add a policy in the land use element to allow a limited amount of residential in these areas, and you can see the verbiage here. So ultimately, we'd like to get feedback on direction. Let us kind of go through, and then we're going to circle back and have conversations about all of this. I understand. I think we should circle back and just have the conversation so we can get through the presentation into the public comment. Okay, so that's the options. We did ask the GPAC whether there were other areas of residential on the land use designation map that you wanted to discuss at this meeting, our last meeting on land use. We did not hear anything, so we're assuming that these are the remaining topics that we're going to go through. And again, when we get through all of this, what we'd like to do is a vote with the changes and then the endorsement or not of the land use map. Okay. I mean, I think we should get through we'll come back to the question. So hold the question. We can bring the slides back up. But we'll do that. Thanks. I think it'd be easier to get through. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Deepak to go through the mobility portion, and then we can open up for questions.
All right, thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so before you have the draft mobility element that was developed my name is Deepak Kaushik. I'm with Iteris. We're a sub-consultant to Ramey on this project. So I'm going to go through the contents of that at a high level, and then we can talk about questions in the small group and further. So first and foremost, though, based on the what we've heard over the last few years from the GPAC, from the public, I want to make sure that we talked about those a little bit before we got into the structure of the element. You know, what we've heard, traffic congestion, and how the role of land use decisions affects traffic, future growth, that's been taken into account. Congestion at US 101 and the interchanges is what we've heard also. Desire for additional enhanced transit service, more bike infrastructure, emergency evacuation connections between the 101 and the 126, and just overall improved access to the beach from the majority of the city. So real quick, what is the mobility element? What is it? What does it do? How is it related to other documents within the city, outside the city? So it really is the overall goal, transportation plan to accommodate the movement of people and goods throughout the city. The meat of it is establishing goals, policies, and actions that can achieve that balanced transportation network and adequately serve the growth that's coming out of supporting the land use element. So related to other documents in the general plan, supports the land use, like I said, feeds into the air, noise, greenhouse gas safety elements with some of the things policies that come out of this. And then relationships to other city documents. The previously adopted general plan, 2005, was a key component of kind of setting the baseline for this, as well as other documents from VCTC and SCAG, Communities Connected, CEQA guidelines, new CEQA guidelines, which I'll go over in the next slide. So the first part of the mobility element really discusses each of these plans that have been incorporated into our mobility element. I won't go through every one of them, but it's a long list of complete streets plans from Ventura, VCTC, CEQA, the Capital Improvement Program, not shown on here. Well, shown on here is the Active Transportation Plan, which was just adopted in 2023. And like I mentioned, the previously adopted general plan, circulation element. So the second section in the mobility element after the discussion of the plans is really the context, which goes over the different modes of transportation in the city. The first one discussed is just the active transportation network that involves the bicycle and pedestrian network, and mainly those the results of the active transportation plan, which was just adopted in 2023, really fed into this section of the plan. Shown here on the left is the proposed citywide bicycle network, and on the right is the citywide pedestrian network. I should mention that the bicycle network, actually in the mobility element, there's two different figures in there. One's the proposed build out of the network. The other one is the AAA, the All Ages and Abilities Network, which came out of the active transportation plan. So those are both included in the mobility element. The second mode is essentially the vehicle roadway classification mode. And so this sets the standards for the functional classification of the roadways within the city, using the city's engineering design standards as a basis. So this involves functional classification, how the roadways operate, how they function in terms of being a arterial, primary, secondary arterial, kind of from top to bottom here, collector thoroughfare, industrial thoroughfare, local streets down to hillside streets and alleys and private streets. So kind of going from streets that carry the highest amount of volume, have the higher speeds, down to the smallest. And this also included integrating complete streets. And I should mention, as a side process in this, we are developing an updated citywide traffic model that's based off the Ventura County transportation model as a more focused citywide model that will incorporate the land use that's coming out of the land use element to develop a network that, a model that can be used for traffic analysis as part of this. So that is a sort of a side, it's part of our contract with the city, and we're developing that in concurrence with this. And the last network described in there, the last mode is transit. So this map shows the bus and rail network broken up by the local bus routes, Gold Coast, and the regional bus routes by VCTC, and then the rail stops and lines, Amtrak and Metrolink. So similar to the issues that we mentioned in the beginning, some of the key considerations are kind of mirror that as far as what's discussed in the mobility element, which is kind of the precursor to the goals, policies, and actions. But yeah, freeway access, traffic congestion, highway interchanges, capacity of interchanges on the 101, active transportation infrastructure, the Main Street Moves project is discussed in there, or configuration, truck routes, and the connection between the 101 and the 126, especially in the westbound 126 to southbound 101, that is discussed in there, as well as the Ventura River Ped Crossing. So kind of the meat of the element is the goals and policies. There are 5 goals with a total of 46 policies in the document. So I will go over just the high level of each of the 5 goals. The first goal, M1, is about focusing on the multimodal network and developing policies that ensure mobility for all, mobility for vulnerable users, neighborhood livability. So there's 21 policies in there. So that's the goal with the most amount of policies. Second goal focuses on active transportation. There's 11 policies in there. Topics such as pedestrian facilities, bicycle facilities, upgrades to those facilities. There's a discussion about emerging technology. There is a parking management goal in there as well. The third goal, policy. Third goal is about transit efficiency, enhancing and expanding transit service. So discussions in there. The 8 policies are about upgrading transit stops, adding routes, and adding service. The fourth goal is about greenhouse gas emissions, air quality in compliance with CEQA, and doing that via the reduction of vehicle miles traveled. So this goal establishes policies for developing VMT guidelines, VMT being vehicle miles traveled, when evaluating new developments, and transit demand management, that's what TDM stands for right there. And the last goal is regarding protected views on this California state scenic highways. So there's 2 policies within that goal. And the last section is the implementation actions. There are 18 actions that relate to the goals and policies that are previously mentioned. Most of the actions out of that are related to the first goal and the second goal, the safe, accessible, multimodal network and active transportation. The majority of the responsibility, so the implementation actions have the goal that it's associated with, the time frame, and then the responsibility. The majority of the responsibility is related to the Public Works Department with community development in there in a few of them. Most of the goals are short-term or long-term or mid-term time frames, though there's a few that are long-term, such as the freeway to 126 to 101 connection that I mentioned. I won't go through all the actions, but some of the high priority actions in there are about developing the capital improvement program, the truck circulation, regarding 126, certain roadway extensions, whether they be local roadways or higher level roadways. CEQA threshold, CEQA being the threshold for evaluating the vehicle miles traveled, like I mentioned, and greenhouse gases, and level of service thresholds. Level of service being the previous way that we in the industry evaluated environmental impacts to on the transportation network, which is a letter grade A, B, C, and D, and E and F, as how we used to evaluate environmental impacts, keeping that as a measure that can still be used by the city for non-environmental, non-CEQA related analysis.
Okay, thank you, Deepak. Moving through here, just a reminder that we didn't get to talk about the vision, core values, and strategies at the last meeting, so we're going to have that conversation at the end of the meeting. It includes these three components: the vision, which is the long-term vision, the core values that define the city's culture and priorities, and then the major strategies that define how the vision and core values will be implemented. If you all remember, this group spent quite a bit of time on these. They went to the city council. The city council endorsed them in March of 2022. March 28th, 2022, and requested some minor text revisions. We made those minor text revisions at your request. We sent out a track changes version of that document attached to the meeting so you can see the changes. In addition, Scott McCarty came up with his own vision and core values, not strategies, but vision and core values. And so what we would like to do this evening, and that was also in the packet, and what we want to do this evening is get a sense of switch to the revised version from Scott or keep the other version, and then if we're keeping the other version, what changes you might like to see to that, so we can move forward with that. So now let's move to the GPAC Q&A. Susan, and maybe asking the public, if anyone is going to want to do a public comment, if you could let us know now so we can allocate the time. We have a really full agenda. So if you haven't filled out a comment card, if you could do that and bring that over. I can bring one over to you as well.
And just a reminder, all we need is your name and first and last name on the speaker cards, and we'll come get those. We have about 13 right now, just as an FYI. So now we'll take some time to have questions, and just a reminder that we will have a later time in the agenda to actually have a discussion and have you share your opinions and on the options. Right now, we want to just get to some questions. So Stephanie, and then go to Sabrina as well.
My question is on the residential and industrial designation options. It looks like there are two options, but it feels like we're missing a third option, which is do not allow residential and industrial. I'm curious.
We can certainly add.
No, I think what was said was that we wanted to study it, right?
To get some options.
Yes.
Yeah, so certainly we can add that one back in. Sabrina.
So first, just a quick, simple question. The bike trail change, does dropping the term park in any way prevent us from accessing grants that are typically available for parks?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel. Staff talked to the Parks Department here about dropping parks from that, and they were okay with it. Is that right? Yeah. So I think they were okay with that, so there wasn't a concern from their part about that.
Okay. And then my next question is, are we going to get a description of what led council to make the changes that they made to what we recommended? I mean, I don't personally watch council meetings, so I don't know what their conversation was to lead, because it doesn't make sense for us to go back and say, never mind, we really think you should stick with our original recommendation if they had good reasons for why they proposed something different. Well,
yeah, I think you have a council member sitting next to you who might be able to weigh in on some of this. The answer, so Sabrina, I don't know if we really have a lot of time to go through and say why they did what they did. I mean, there were 4 meetings with the council talking about them, about all of the whole land use map. We can try and recall for you what they were. I'm happy to try doing that, and maybe
Yeah, I was going to say perhaps we can let Doug and Bill kind of stew on that for a few minutes, and maybe when we get to the discussion, we can.
I think if there's a more specific question about it, that we can try and shed some light on it.
Kind of going off of that, what when is the map final? Like, if the group here tonight decides to go to choose one of the options that isn't the council endorsed direction, does council have to reapprove what we approved? And then it's final? Like,
Yeah,
when does it end?
Thanks, Carba. So the process, the way it's going to work is that we're going to finalize the map, and then we're going to take it to, I believe, Planning Commission and then Council in February, March-ish. And so they will weigh in on that and make the final decision. Whatever the decision that they're making there is going to go into the draft general plan, which will be released to the public. There will then be public comments on the map, and then ultimately the council will have the Planning Commission and the council will have hearings on the entire general plan, which includes the land use map. So there are a couple of opportunities, but I just want to stress that, you know, tonight should be the night where kind of this group is giving their guidance on what you all want to see and where you are with this. And then I think we really do have to kick it finally over to the council for the final decision. And it is ultimately the Planning Commission and then the council who gets to decide.
Other questions, clarifying questions before we hear some public comment? From the GPAC, sorry.
Does it have to be a question, or can I make it? Okay, I'll wait.
Yeah, this is just a chance to get questions answered, and then your discussion will come after you hear some more of what the public has had to say. Any
You can
questions
ask
for,
questions
for
later,
Deepak?
too.
You can also ask questions later, of course, but any other clarifying questions? So we'll maybe jump into public comment. Who will be my timer for public comment?
Got it? Okay.
So I didn't get any additional cards from what I had.
Did anyone not hand in a card that wants to speak? Did I see any hands?
Nope.
Okay,
I think I got it.
thank you.
And I'll call 2 names at a time so we can kind of have one person already queued up for the next speaker. So do I have a timer? Okay, thank you, Rachel. So our first speaker is Lisa Gassaway, followed by Marilyn Irk. Here, you can actually speak here. I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Go to the front.
Well, darn it, I wanted to be last because I wanted to sweep this up afterwards, but I'll start it off. So we're here regarding the Metrolink TOD decision. The Planning Commission and the City Council already made their decision. They made a good decision based on a lot of public input. A lot of people spent their time, which is really valuable, right? Going to those meetings, expressing why it was inappropriate to make the changes that they wanted to make to, and I'll go into that in a little bit. They made their decisions, and after that, the Community Development Group put out a survey to say, just in case you didn't really want that decision, give us some feedback. So, and out of the survey feedback, it came the same, let's stick with the council endorsed decisions, and now it's coming back again. So to me, that's a slap in the face to the public process, and I don't know what's behind this. Honestly, I think it's a lack of understanding of that area. You know, it seems that everybody wants to put all the RHNA housing numbers in District 6. And even talking about light industrial and putting housing into light industrial, it may work on the other side of the 101, okay? There's not a traffic congestion problem there. But if you're talking about there on Ventura Boulevard, you cannot overload that. Right, if the gas prices go up and that inexpensive gas station, Silva's, gets very popular, it already blocks that single lane road, let alone if you're adding 350 units plus 40% of units all over in all that light industrial area. The lack of understanding also was noted in the agenda, which confused East and West, okay? So we just would like to have the respect of all the time that we've put into this, and thank you. Thanks.
So Marilyn Irk will be followed by Mark Abbey.
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Marilyn Erklievsky. I'm from District 6. I just wanted to endorse the city council's previous decision on the general plan, specifically Ventura Road, in regards to the eastern and western portion, as well as the Johnson Drive corridor. I think all of us have been working really hard, including council members. All residents of District 6 have come together, and this is something that we've been working on for, gosh, I think over a year now. And we came to agreement or to terms on this, and to change it, I think is going to be a little bit too much for all of us. So please keep that in mind, and I thank you.
Mark Abbey will be followed by Margaret Suppi, if I say that right.
Good evening, GPAC. GPAC member Rodriguez asked a very good question. What's gone on before? Well, there were surveys, there were 2 planning commission meetings, there were 4 city council meetings. Both of those had unanimous votes in favor of the Metrolink TOD area map option 1 as currently stated. So mixed use 3 on the western parcel and light industrial 3 flex on the eastern parcel. On that eastern parcel, you currently have Marshall's Bodacious Barbecue, which we all love. And we have auto repair service center businesses. So this GPAC has talked about preserving industrial uses. And we certainly want to see that continue in the Montalvo area. There are, for the housing element, 1,300 units were put on Johnson Drive. For Johnson Drive, Ventura Boulevard, Grand Avenue, over 2,000 units put in that area alone, the Johnson Drive corridor. Is there any other area that's taking on 2,000 units? And somebody still wants to insist that we make it even more dense in the Triangle area where the Metrolink station currently is? I don't think so. It's not what the public wants, and I hope you keep that in mind as you deliberate your decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret, Miss Margaret, followed by Stephen Posthumus.
I'd just like to agree with the people that spoke before me. I live close to the Metrolink station. I love having the Metrolink there. However, it's enough. It's perfect the way it is. Please, please. Thank you.
Stephen, and if I could just ask the audience just to keep it down, please. Thank you. Stephen Posthumus, followed by Helen Oloyan.
Hi. Excuse me, I get pretty nervous doing this. My name's Stephen. My family runs Associated Tires. My grandfather and my dad started it, going on 39 years this year. We're thriving over there. We won another award this year for most Google business reviews out of every tire shop in Ventura. We won it last year as well. We'd like to run, keep it going another 40 years. We'd like to, stick with what City Council already voted with. I appreciate you guys.
Helen, followed by Amy Cherry.
How much time do I have? 2 minutes. Good evening, everybody. Helen Oloyan for the record, District 1. So I'm going to give a couple comments about circulation. First one is the off-ramp to Highway 33 at Stanley should be prioritized in itself as a policy, and that seems to be missing from the key considerations of the circulation element. I love the policy for first mile, last mile issue resolution and the EV infrastructure. I think those are fantastic additions. Policy 1.9, I would suggest ensuring ADA accessible sidewalks for existing conditions, not just new project development, but we go back and fix the sidewalks that we already have. I don't see a policy number, but there was something about study Metrolink expansion. I think it should be work with Metrolink so we don't exhaust our own general funds on a study that may not even be something we control. I'm also interested to see if any Vision Zero principles could be added to the circulation element. And then going back to the industrial items. Okay, so my professional opinion, land use opinion, is that we keep residential and industrial land uses separate unless we get something in writing from the Air Pollution Control District blessing the combination of those two things. Because there's no way I was going to say a bad word. There's no way that we can pull a permit for any of the industrial folks if there's a sensitive receptor, i.e. a dwelling unit, too close. So to the extent we can keep that separation until science saves us would be my professional judgment on this. And I think that was it. Oh, wait, one more thing, sorry. If we could modify that language in here about residential and industrial designations options to protect naturally occurring affordable housing and already affordable housing in our communities, I think that goes a much further way than requiring new potential housing be affordable. Okay, thank you now.
Amy will be followed by Casey Rodriguez.
Hi there. Thank you guys for showing up. Apparently, that was a thing. A couple things, if you want to go back and watch City Council's deliberations and all of the West Side and every industrial owner in town speak on why they wanted to keep their industrial land that way, you could watch it on YouTube. The credit union was never discussed by you guys, even though they're changing it, so you might want to talk about that. At least have a discussion instead of having it being manufacturing industrial. They want to change it to commercial. I mean, it's a perfect spot for some craft industrial. Let's see what else. There's plenty of commercial around the Market Street area, downtown, or on the west side that could be residential, like a block from industrial, if that's what you're looking for. Huge red areas everywhere that could be residential. And then what I originally wanted to talk about was goals, overlays, policies, things that haven't been discussed about protecting our public resources, scenic resources. Possibly ask for an overlay that designates scenic highways like the 33, portions of the 101, 101-26 interchange, scenic approaches like Seaward Avenue, California Street, where you could see the hills or the ocean. Actually have, policies that protect the scenic routes, Poli, Harbor, and Foothill, so that it remains scenic. And scenic vistas and view sheds, Vista Del Mar, Alessandro, Foothill, Grant Park, Cemetery Park, Arroyo, even Arroyo Bird Park and Taylor Ranch. Even Ventura College has some amazing views. You could just copy and paste the Ventura County general plan because they have a whole section on scenic resources, which are vitally important, as stated in our vision statement. Thank you.
And I believe you also submitted written comments as well for copies. We can distribute those to the members of the GPAC as well. So Casey Rodriguez will be followed by Jean Thurston Keller.
Haku, hello. First of all, with it being 2025, it's time for all city meetings to begin with a land acknowledgement. So just a reminder, we are standing on unceded Chumash land. Secondly, I am so excited to meet new District 6 residents. Only by working together will we be able to make great changes in our community by working together, sharing our stories and experiences. We all have lessons to teach and learn. As a new member of Matava Area Community Council, I look forward to collaborating with all of you. For we have been made aware we must stay alert. And to do this successfully, it will take all of us. So please, let's stay together. I am only here to add my voice to all District 6 citizens who are asking this board to follow through with their original city council agreement regarding the Matava Area Auto Service Group. Keep the western parcel as 3-story mixed use and the eastern portion as light industrial 3 flex. Also, TOD does not belong in District 6. We are not a high-quality transit area. It is crucial this area remains a mixed-use 3. District 6 has already done more than its share in RHNA numbers. Other districts that are far behind should be the ones asked to do more. Enough time has been spent on this matter, no need to keep going back and forth. Just because one council member, who's not even our district council member, requested it. Tonight, please, let's honor the hard work and time GPAC members, planning commissioners, and city council members, and us District 6 residents have already invested and go with the original agreement. Keep all industrial zones without making special zoning zones as well. Thank you.
Jean Thurston Keller, followed by Karen Martin.
Thank you for having the opportunity to speak. Democracy works when people listen. And the people have spoken already, and the council has already made a decision. Keep with your previous decision. Stop revisiting it. The people have spoken. I live in Montalvo. Actually, I live on Montalvo Drive. I have neighbors that don't have sidewalks. You guys have done a good job in getting us some sidewalks, and I do want to recognize that. It does take work to do that. But we don't have enough, and you're talking about increasing density. The streets are full. You have cars on the sidewalks, and my neighbors, one has 2 kids. She has to walk 6 feet out in the street on Montalvo with cars going back and forth. It's not safe. You mentioned how you want all ages and abilities. That includes kids. That includes older people who are walking their dogs down the street. My neighbor here tonight, she does that all the time. We need to be able to walk in our own neighborhoods. So we need more sidewalks if you're going to be adding more densities. Thank you.
Karen Martin will be followed by Stephen Thurston Keller.
Good evening, GPAC members. My name is Karen Martin. I'm the owner of AutoMedic, which is located in the Montalvo Auto Service Center at 6353 Ventura Boulevard, the topic of tonight. It's only been 462 days since we voted on this already. So here we are back again. We attended 3 city council meetings over a 6-week period, sometimes staying till 12:30 at night, standing because the room was packed. We had our neighbors, we had our employees, we had our customers there. Okay, the center has been there, the Montalvo Service Center has been there since 1978. Steve with Associated is here. There are 15 different businesses. Some of you are probably sick of seeing my face and hearing the same story, but we've been here, we've done this, we've voted. Let's get on, okay? 15 businesses, general and foreign auto repair, tires and alignment, carburetor, smog check, custom fabrication, stereo and electronic, upholstery, barbecue place right in the middle. We are located in the perfect location between 2 railroad tracks looking at the 101. Who wants to live there? I don't. Okay, it's the perfect place for industrial. That's where we are, that's where we should remain. The road is a narrow one-way each way, two lanes. When I drive home at night, I straddle the potholes so that I don't ruin my car. It's in disrepair, okay? If we put a high-density housing complex there, I don't know how we're gonna make it to the freeway either way. There's just no way. And when there's an accident on the 101, because the on-ramp merges to a lane that's already merging, there's a wreck there every week. Then our road, Ventura Boulevard, is bumper to bumper with people getting off on Johnson trying to make it to Victoria. The good news is we've already voted on this. We don't have to tear anything down, build anything up. We've got it. We're good. So keep it the way it is. Thank you.
Stephen Thurston Keller, if I could remind everyone to, the raising of hands is great, thank you. Stephen Thurston Keller, followed by Lou Piper.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to speak. My esteemed members, neighbors, and also excellent business people. Love your tires. Good stuff. I want to talk to you tonight about process. We are a representative democracy. Now, for that to work, we have to follow the process. My neighbors have diligently followed that process. In good faith, they have worked hard and followed that process. You started the process. You provided a plan. It went forward. We had our ideas. We got our representatives on the council to listen. Went through a lot of process. They did their process. They made their vote. They did their decision. Through our negotiations, we came to a mutually satisfying decision. Why now are you changing the process? Why is it that one person decides they don't like what the council has come up with? You once said that you didn't have time to, and that's wonderful. You know, you don't need to. I just wanted to answer her question. They had your idea, your plan. They heard our comments. They made their decision. And that should be it. You should be, okay, well, yeah, got it. They made a decision. Why is it now that you're changing the process? That's what I want to know. Is it for a financial gain? We don't know. We don't know why this is happening now. And we're a little upset. We must stay with the democratic process. The council voted. We agreed with it. Let's move on.
Next speaker is Lou Piper, and then I have one written comment that I'll read after that.
I guess I'm batting cleanup. Hi, everybody. I'm really new to the area. I've just purchased Marshall's Bodacious Barbecue over the last year. It was one of those things where Marshall Schmidt, who long time, doing barbecue here in Ventura, it was time for him to retire. And he did not want Marshall's Bodacious to go away, not only for his own employees and his customer base, but the entire community. Now, we've heard a vision of what all these plans could bring, but I can tell a story too. Before I decided to buy there, I did my due diligence and I thought this issue was put to bed. But you ever watch a zombie movie? Seems like it's coming back. And that's frustrating. I mean, I'm a businessman. I understand that spot is right next to the 101. A big shiny sign or a tower or whatever it is will get people to pull off. But in the meantime, while that's being built, it's going to choke out a lot of the residents, a lot of the businesses that are there. Why? Because you won't be able to get through on those roads while big trucks are bringing concrete and rebar and all that stuff. Because it's tight. And if you rezone, once those small shops go, people's only option is to go down the street to the big dealerships for their car repairs. And I don't think that's right either. And I certainly can't run my wood fire grill, with smoke coming up if there's a apartment building over me. That won't work for them. So I would think that we should stick with the decision that's already been made. And I thank everybody for your comments. You guys are great. Thank you for your hard work.
And the last comment I have is from Katie Elwood, a written comment, do not change previously approved plans. So with that, we'll close public comment, and we will move into the GPAC discussion. And I think we're going to go back to the earlier slides so that you have those decision points. We'll tackle one by one, if we can, and have a discussion around each of those proposed options or changes. And to Stephanie's point, we'll change the one to add one more option there as well. So let's talk about the shopping center possible change first. Discussion on that. Casey.
Would one of our council members volunteer to catch us up to speed on council's conversations?
Would one of our, Doug, do you want to take a stab at that?
My recollection is the concern with, was it city center, or what do you call it? Neighborhood center, is the fear of losing the commercial component, because it could be all residential. And so the key was to make sure that that parcel always had a piece of commercial there, because whether it's the Ashwood Center, for instance, with the CVS, or some of the other areas that have the grocery stores where we thought this is a great idea, it sounds really neat to have a neighborhood center. The fact is neighborhood center could be all residential, and we could lose that component of commercial. And so it was looked at by the city council to change it to commercial, and then allow, hopefully, that commercial to have a component of residential.
Bill, did you want to add anything to that before I go over to Peter?
would just, this is actually my area of town. So I was one of the big drivers in keeping it commercial in terms of it's basically, those are the 3 retail centers of the entire east side. So there is no additional retail areas there or commercial centers. So if we lost those commercial centers, we would just continue to be a bigger food desert area on it. So that was the motivation there.
So Pete, if I could have the audience just keep the volume down a little bit, please.
Yeah, maybe we can get a clarification on this, because I understood that neighborhood center was only 40% residential, not 100. And the reason, Keithy, the reason this came up was I brought it up last meeting, was that because of AB 2011 allows for commercial to become residential, allows for residential to be built on commercial properties. So, and that's also SB 6 with a little different tuning, does the same thing. So my thought was to protect the commercial, going with neighborhood center and only allowing 40% residential on those properties would protect the commercial where the current designation doesn't necessarily do that.
Matt, can you verify that, yes, that designation does limit it to 40%?
Yes, that is correct. It's 40%.
The SB 6?
So state laws is in flux, and it's really difficult to give a decision on that. The state law does say that you can build residential in commercial zones, but I don't know if, I honestly don't know whether Pete's recommendation will give more protection to the commercial or not in that situation.
And I think we all know that state laws can change from day to day, so you don't want to build your plan around state law either. So any more discussion on this one? Are we ready to take a vote on this? Stephanie, and then Nick, you look like you were getting ready.
I mean, I was just going to say maybe the comment from GPAC can be whatever is going to preserve the most commercial, grocery center, retail, and not allow it to become all residential.
Yeah, this is, the state is evolved, the laws are evolving. The intention, I think, is the same with both of these, that, we recognize the need, the value of these commercial centers to serve these neighborhoods. We also have to recognize that retail is changing. People are not shopping the way they used to. So we just be mindful that whatever we say and however we write it, these centers to assure that they retain some service. I don't know whether working through policy, I don't think zoning law is going to do it for us, guys.
So adding a policy that asks that kind of understand the nature of changing shopping centers.
Okay, I have a recommendation. This might take the heat off of all of us, is that we just make a recommendation that it's brought and addressed at council with the knowledge, and let them know that there is a state law that could potentially allow commercial or residential on those areas, because that was never brought up when it was discussed at the city council originally.
Just a thought, when we do vote on this, can we vote on each parcel separately as opposed to just all 3?
I think that would be a motion that you could make, certainly. But it sounds like, Pete, you had a different kind of motion on the table, is just to would you like to state it in a way that would be different from the two options that are shown?
So actually, just to be clear, I just want to make sure that I'm hearing this correctly, which is that there's a strong feeling among the GPAC that you want to do everything you can to protect the commercial uses that are there. And it's not necessarily about, maybe some residential might be okay, but it's really about protecting the commercial. Is that?
It sounds like the worry was that state law was going to allow the commercial to be taken over by residential.
Okay. Well, right. Yeah, it's okay. So I mean, I think, it feels like in a sense that's kind of is that the direction? Is there any disagreement with that?
The main priority is to protect the retail, but primarily the grocers at these 3 centers, and limit the amount of housing to be taken over to take over those spaces. And so whichever,
And ideally, on these three, what the council said is no housing at all to protect that. Right.
So it needs to be brought back to
That seems
council.
like the top one, but then can it, you know, if that isn't allowed, because I think the state law wasn't even passed when the council talked about this, right? So, you know, if those commercial centers can all go to residential at this point, like 100% residential, then the next is sort of Pete's suggestion of, well, maybe that 40% actually protects the commercial better. So I think we might need to talk to the attorneys about the interpretation.
You do have to meet some pretty high thresholds for affordability, and then prevailing wage on top of that. So it's not just come in and propose commercial, or I mean, residential in the commercial. You have to meet some very high thresholds to use those on it. And SB 6 is higher than SB 2011 on it.
And actually, Bill, to just ask you, since you know these laws potentially better than anyone here, what's your sense of the best direction that would protect commercial the most on these parcels? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you don't know what the state's going to do. I mean, on it. I don't think when they designed those laws that they were necessarily going after, they're really looking at the old office buildings that are, you know, 30% vacant, 20% vacant. You know, that's where their intent of using those laws. It's not the act of, you know, commercial. I mean, at the end of the day, my fear is commercial doesn't know what commercial is going to be yet. I mean, I think we're still in flux, you know, in terms of, you know, it annoys me when I see like all the people that, you know, you just get your deliveries. Not that, you know, I totally get why people do it, but I'm just, it is so in flux, you know. My goal is to protect the commercial as long as, until we know what retail is.
so would it be safe to say that we could say, let's leave the council recommendation as is, but please bring up to council this issue of we want to do whatever is strongest to protect the commercial in these centers, and that was always the intent of this, why it came back. Is that, I see show of hands, oh, that looks okay? Anyone disagree?
One question though, could that desire to protect commercial be put into maybe the zoning aspect of that parcel?
Yes, I mean, yeah, we can, that'll be another piece to strengthen it, but I think that just the conversation here would be just bringing up to council that this dialogue happened and that the priority is about those protecting commercial, particularly the grocery stores. All right, so nobody disagrees that wants to make a statement? Perfect, okay, let's move to the next item. So this is the Metrolink TOD, we've heard a number of comments about. Matt explained the difference of the council's recommendation versus the GPACs. Maybe there's some discussion from the council members about that dialogue at the council. Do you want to start, Bill?
Sure. I think the public speakers covered it. I mean, that was the consideration that council made when, oh, I'm sorry. The council agreed with the public, basically with the public comment speakers we heard tonight. That's why the decision was made.
So public comment and testimony really helped guide council's change on that.
Two things. One is that, this has been a very long process, and sometimes it has been somewhat convoluted as well. But I got to tell you is that this was part of the process, is that at the end, we go through and ask the question, do we have any consternation on any part of what we've discussed for the last 343 years? And no, it's 3.5 years, okay? A little exaggeration. But all that said, so we are doing the process, all right? And it does call the question, if we do believe, I am a strong believer, for instance, in mass transit. So if we believe that someday, through a lot of hard work and passion and support, we actually one day are able to get on some mass transit that we can all use, then that was the whole concept of transit-oriented development. So it called the question, should it be mixed use 4 or should it be mixed use 3? And the council settled on mixed use 3. But I had to ask that question, I gotta tell you, because, not because I wanna get rid of the light industrial flex. I do want to add something to that at some point here soon. But I do want to see that we're owning true to the fact that we believe transportation centers are important to the future of the city. And doing something greater than what you could do in every other spot of the city made sense. So that was what was brought up.
Maybe that could be some dialogue about the policy, the mobility element as well.
And I think that's my point. I'm fully supportive of keeping the light industrial flex. I do agree with the GPAC's original recommendation of mixed use 4 on the other parcel, because it is one of 3 opportunities in our community to truly have a transit-oriented development. And everywhere else in our strategies and our goals and our vision, all of that, it talks about taking us out of the car-centric model and using mass transit, different modes of transportation in order to move our folks around. There's somewhere in the 3,000 pages, we have a little box that talks about how many folks are commuting into Ventura every day to be a part of our workforce. What it doesn't mention is how many folks are commuting out of Ventura every day to be a part of another community's workforce. And we're never going to, I think Nick Deitch brought it up a few meetings ago, it's like that chicken and the egg. Which comes first? Do you build the transit-oriented development, or do you get rid of cars, or how do you make that happen? And I think if we're going to have these goals and strategies, we need to be able to follow that up with the actions on that.
So you'd be in favor of the the third bullet point there? Just changing the mixed use 3 to 4.
I'm in favor of the city council resolution or decision. Especially for the light industrial and the industrial, we already had that, or we've heard, and I remember hearing from business owners in that area, and this is the same issue that we had, on the west side when we talked about removing industrial. So I would say keep that. I don't remember why the city council went from 4 to 3. It would be interesting to, to hear that, but I'd be in favor of staying 3 in light industrial.
Go to Sabrina first, and I'll come back to Carba.
So I guess 2 things. The first is process. I think, Doug, you're right? Like our process as a governmental agency / commission, right? It should be transparent. It should be something that people can follow. And as a GPAC member in full, I wasn't at our last meeting, so, apologize for that. But it is confusing when we make a recommendation, council just decides something else based on feedback from the community or whatever council considered, and then it comes back, because not every decision where we disagreed with council has come back to us, right? So I guess I would personally like clarity on why this one came back to us. I mean, what was different about this? And then, again, I think transit-oriented developments are important, but it seems like we have functioning, successful businesses there. And as a community, we really need to preserve our small businesses. We know that that's something that is really important to us as an economy. And so if we have things that are working there, I think there are other opportunities to build.
And just in response to why it came back, it was the presentation of the most recent land use map a couple of meetings ago, where members of GPAC were allowed to raise some concerns or potential questions, and some of those then made their way back to us. We go to Carva.
And I just quickly weigh in on that. Our assumption when we did that was that the areas that the council had decided on would remain as what the council decided, because it had already gone through the process. It was really supposed to be focused on the other areas, the residential areas. And so, we went through a whole process with the community and made changes to the map, and we wanted to bring the whole map in its entirety back. But it really wasn't the intent that we were gonna dive into every area that the council decided on and then come back. But people brought it up, which is why it's being discussed again.
To Sabrina's point, I also, in respect of the process, and I understand what you just said, I do ask that we expeditiously vote to just keep the city council endorsed direction for all 3 of these locations. However, I also am a huge fan of transit-oriented developments, but yet I think enough has been said on this parcel in particular that I think we should just move forward with A and genuinely move on. But to your point about the chicken versus the egg, I think if we really want, I mean, the mobility element itself, quote, extremely limited, inconvenient, not that many services provided to LA. Like it lacks, you know, quality parking. It's in a random location. I mean, I've literally gotten off of Metrolink and people are like, "Where am I?" And I'm like, "You're in East Ventura." So like you know, I think if we spent the next 25 years working with Metrolink to make it a better station, then maybe in the next general plan we can work on, you know, changing this parcel. But for now, like, let's keep this as it is and maybe start different conversations about the chicken is making transit better, not this, you know, development.
Great, thank you. And it was Nick, or who was Pete?
I had a discussion or some emails back and forth with VCTC on this location, and because I had heard that the Metrolink station was going to be gotten rid of, the VCTC said there's no plans to get rid of it, but there's no plans to upgrade it, but there possibly in the future plans to move it to the main line. So with those three, there's no guarantee that that station's going to be there in the long term anyway.
Question was, what does move it to the main line mean? It's on a, right now it's on a spur, so it would be on the main line. Any other comments before we take a vote on this one?
I echo everything that was just shared. I think, you know, part of the challenge is this was an industrial rail line. It wasn't meant to serve transit purposes. The whole area was industrial and it evolved over time, and now we're trying to figure out how to adapt this other thing to it. And the timing is not good. And I'm looking at the overall mobility transit network bus and rail plan for the city, and it looks pretty naked. There's not a lot going on there, and I think we'd be better off focusing on the interior of our community and where to, and that was a question I had about the policies relative to transit, that to make sure that we're locating, wherever we can, that we're locating newer, higher density residential in strong association with transit links and connections internally, so that we can retrain ourselves and give younger people and older people a chance to live in places where they don't need to get in cars all the time. So I think ultimately right now this is the right thing to do. I do think over time it is going to change. I was very disappointed that the collection didn't include a TOD point of connection.
All right, so let's take a show of hands for those that would like to keep the council endorsed direction. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 for, 1 against. So we'll note that, and we'll also note in the notes about kind of this idea of still a focus on TOD or improving transit in the future, just not at this spot and not now. All right, move to the next. It's already there, okay. So this is the issue of the topic of residential in industrial. We had a lot of conversation about this, have had over a couple of different meetings throughout the last years, but the last meeting in December was probably the more in-depth conversation, and you directed staff to go back and consider ways to look at industrial and housing, and could there be any way to allow that. So the two options that you saw there, option 1 with the more high level in the general plan and letting the zoning modification kind of deal with the details. Option 2, adding more specific direction in the general plan with additional details provided for direction in the zoning code. And Stephanie added another one, which was don't allow housing in industrial. So any thoughts or discussion we want to have on this?
I know we need housing, everybody knows that. What I don't know is if we need housing in areas that have industrial trucks coming through, so kids on bicycles are interfacing with that, or loud noise in residential areas so that people complain that the industrial is ruining their quality of life. I don't understand the codes and zoning enough to really know if the type of industrial noises and smells and heavy equipment would interfere with quality of life, but I want to bring it up now because it seems part and parcel to what we're talking about.
Other thoughts? Doug.
A couple things. One is that part of what attracted me to downtown and the West Side when I came here almost 40 years ago is the fact that it was built at a time that people built what they needed, and they built that store down on the corner, and they have their business a few blocks away. Granted, we've come a long way in understanding the negative aspects of certain industries. A lot of the industries we have today are very clean. The only thing you could point to at times would be how to get product from one location to the next. There's a lot of people who don't want to live in those tract developments that 73 or 74% of the population of California live in. There's the new generation that actually values living close by to where they go walk to work, where they could walk to their grocery store and to their gym and see their neighbors there. And I think providing that type of living where, and now with so much protection from a lot of our laws, especially thanks to our state, being able to protect our environment and protect our health, that I think a lot of what we call craft industrial is really the 3D printing, the putting products together and assembling them and creating new ideas that the rest of the world's going to end up enjoying and thriving and increasing their quality of life because of the ingenuity that we have here. And living in that creative environment, it's not things, great things don't just happen and often don't happen just in offices. They happen because somebody's thinking of this new idea. And as long as we're respectful of, and this is the concern, one final thing, is having any housing, we could always say housing's here, grocery stores are here, and commercial is here, and then we have industrial way over here. We could keep doing that if we had a transportation system that allowed people to easily move through those areas. If you don't want to keep adding to the negative traffic aspect in Southern California, then yes, we could keep doing that. But if you want to fix that, you would start looking at how people live and work. And you do it in a way that we protect industrial and that we protect commercial and still take care of people's health and quality of life. And I would recommend that we take light industrial, flex, and look at zoning criteria that would allow for some housing on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Other comments or discussion on this item? Bill.
I think everybody's approaching the idea from a really genuine place. They're trying to help their employees. They want housing. The state of California views housing as an absolute right. And if you allow housing, it is an absolute right. You cannot deny it. That's continued to be removed more and more from the city council's jurisdiction. And I'm very concerned about having housing where we have our industrial with sensitive receptors that we're not going to be able to, we're going to start excluding businesses on it. And that's just kind of where I am with this, because it is an absolute right.
So thankfully I'm sitting next to Bill because I said, so what is, you know, I'm a biologist by training. What does 54 units per acre look like? And he was like, that's rental. That's not for sale, right? So I think when we were talking about that kind of density as a potential, you know, thing to add to industrial, I think all of us like the idea of, you know, the cabinet maker who maybe has a house behind his shop, but how do you plan for that, right? Because what you mostly encounter are people who complain about noise or smells or traffic or parking because they live right next to industrial. And I think you know, Helen had it right. Like, we have to be worried about the environmental aspects of these for families who are living near these places. So I would be in favor of no housing in light industrial.
Great. We'll take a couple more comments and then we'll go ahead and call for a raise of hands.
I think the intention is to try to put some housing close to where jobs are. And that doesn't mean that we need to take all of the industrial area and sprinkle housing all across it, or the opportunity for housing, and that probably wouldn't be a great idea. But perhaps we could identify certain realms, areas, sites, parcels, whatever, within proximity of, and I would say quarter mile is a decent, that's the kind of the standard walking distance, where we could allow for housing that we knew was in proximity of these businesses. I have personally known 3 people who lived in their shops illegally, but it happens, and it will continue to happen, and it probably will continue to increase.
Great, and
Really quickly, I think, and then to Nicholas, who brought up the idea, so we'll give him the respect of this. But I believe the zoning code allows for a caretaker unit already.
so the current zoning allows for a caretaker on site. Was that
So
what
this
you were
would be
going to point out
This would
there?
be something different.
So I think I'm correct in saying that what we all agree on is that we want to see a robust, thriving industry in Ventura. I certainly do. So in that sense, I mean, I agree with Louise and with Stephanie and Bill and everybody else. That is the intention. I want to point out, I really hope that everybody will just be aware of the fact that the current general plan has one industrial land use designation. As a matter of policy, it encourages live-work where it's appropriate and where it is consistent with industrial uses. What is really being talked about here is not a big change. Are we going to suddenly allow residential and industrial? What we're talking about is, are we suddenly going to say, no, we're changing that policy so that we are forbidden to have industrial and a residential mix, which incidentally has worked out very well in many cities. But so what I'd like to point out is that it would be a step backwards to say, well, look, right now it is allowed per a general plan in any of the industrial areas, industrial designations. The city council and city staff so far have not seen fit to do it, other than this caretaker. So we're not saying, oh, suddenly everything's going to become industrial, become a mix of residential and industrial. What I'm advocating is let's leave it the way it is and leave it to zoning. So in that case, option 1, write a policy for the land use element to allow a limited amount of residential, et cetera. I would be in favor of that, and I would take it a step further, as our current general plan takes it a step further, and to say that it is a secondary use and that industrial takes priority, and that the uses that residential use should be consistent with the industrial use. There are many, and just let me finish with this. There are many areas in Ventura, in the industrial sector in Ventura. It's widely varied, and as was pointed out by one of the speakers, I'll paraphrase, the constraints to industrial and residential are quite different on Ventura Boulevard than they are on Ventura Avenue, and quite different again than they are in Market Street, and quite different again than they are in other parts of the Montalba area. So what I'm advocating is leave it as it is and allow city staff to do the zoning. If industrial and residential mix works in a particular area, let it work.
And Louise.
So I think what we need to be very, very careful of is unintended consequences. And I know that I seem to be the voice that keeps bringing up exactly those words, unintended consequences. Either Bill or Nick said that, nobody knows what the state is going to do in terms of regulation. Well, one thing that we do know is that the trend is towards not making it easier for industrial businesses, right? The trend is towards more regulation over industrial businesses. And California law, which the city has no control over, as we've pointed out in discussions earlier tonight, is very clear that when you start having residential in or near industrial, quite a few laws at the state level come into play. Health and safety code, it changes what different air contaminants and what different levels could be. California Code of Regulations, Title 27, governing hazardous materials, can restrict hazardous material use in industrial that has residential. And when I say hazardous materials, I am not talking ethyl methyl death. Of course, that is included in there, but so is paint, paint thinner, the very things that your cabinet maker would be using in his shop. The fact that he has his residence right next to the shop may mean that he can't use that paint and paint thinner anymore. Even CEQA, the way CEQA is set up, residential near industrial increases the likelihood of litigation over industrial. Then there's noise ordinances. Those are more set on the local level, but noise ordinances, industrial businesses sometimes need to get early morning deliveries, sometimes need to get work 24 hours. You can't do that if there is residential in the same area. There's traffic and operating hour limitations. Even the California Air Resources Board, in their air quality and land use handbook, they suggest a buffer of 1,000 feet between residential and industrial in order to reduce exposure to emissions. Not saying that we won't move towards cleaner and cleaner businesses, but the way the California laws are written and the way California is enacting new laws constantly, if we allow residential beyond the caretaker language, we are opening up the door to squeezing out our industrial businesses. It never, to Bill's point, it never happens that the housing goes away. We will be opening the door, and then people will talk about the vote at this meeting as being the night that industrial started to die in Ventura. Thank you.
Do you want to add one more thing?
Just one quick comment. As of today, there is a 2% vacancy rate for industrial property in the city of Ventura, which is basically nothing is available. And I believe someone in this GPAC actually mentioned when they tried to move their industrial business, it was a miracle that they were able to find another location in the city. I talk to businesses every day who have to move outside of Ventura because they cannot find suitable industrial locations to relocate into.
So I think it's time to probably take a sure.
It seems like we're all in agreement that this is a really complex issue, and so I'm proposing a fourth option that's just number 3 from option 1, which is that we add an action to conduct a study to examine if residential land uses should be added here, and leave it at that, because it feels to me that this is a much bigger issue, and we're trying to get a vote done tonight, so that's my proposal.
So leaving the land use map as it is currently, but adding that in as an action in the policy document. And Philip, the last word on this.
Real quick, yeah, I would agree that we need to have some kind of agreement on something tonight. And I think that last item that you mentioned would be the way to go in terms of, we're the general plan. We're not talking specifics. So allow the study to happen, and then we could move from there.
Great. Stephanie, would you allow that for an option with your choice, your earlier recommendation, or do you want to vote on that one first? The one of just leaving housing out of residential? We're saying, I think Casey was suggesting, go with leaving residential out of industrial at present, but adding in a policy to do some analysis or study or look at what might be appropriate in the future. So I'm going to do that one first, unless you want to do one that's just leave housing. How about this? We'll do it a two-part. First, raise of hands for those who would like to, at this time, leave housing out of industrial on the land use map. That's what the current map, the proposed land use map, right? Am I speaking?
Proposed land use map has no residential in it. It could probably have a caretaker unit like zoning, but it wouldn't have.
Which is
any kind of
different than, Nicholas, what you're saying with the land use map as
Yes.
approved, land use categories as approved. So that was 10, which that's a. So now the second one, the second thing to vote on, would you like to include a policy/action in the general plan land use element that focuses on number 3, conducting a study to examine how residential land uses can be added to employment districts, looking at best locations, potential impact to employment uses, amount of residential, et cetera. So that's kind of conducting some sort of an analysis or study. So anyone in favor of adding that to the land use policy document? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that, yeah, I didn't count you. So that one does not pass at this time. But I think we can definitely ensure there's some note on the dialogue about it's about the health and safety, not to take away from this idea of having walkable. I think we have a lot of different walkability policies in the document. Perhaps we could even talk about that with the mobility element when you get into your small groups. So. All right, move to the next. Yes, borrow the mic. Would you like to use the mic?
I just got an email from the fire chief saying that there's a fire at Johnson and Auto Center. I know there's a lot of people here from the Montalvo area. It's a vegetation fire. The only reason I bring it up is there's air assets en route. So I'm not quite sure. So if anybody, just FYI.
Thank you. So do we want to move right into the small group discussion breakouts? Okay. So thank you to the public that has to get out of here. We appreciate your input.
Okay, so we have 50 minutes at this point. I think we should really spend the majority of time on the mobility element. So what I'd like to propose is that you spend maybe half of that time, 25 minutes, in the small group, and then write notes down, and we can report back on those, but write the notes so we can get them as well.
So I think if we could divide into groups of 4 and 5. So if you 5 would like to get together, and maybe Scott and you and David can come over on this side, the 4 of you, Karba down to Casey, and then if you 5, Pete down to Stephanie, could get together. Maybe Kyler, if you and Peter want to come over here. And you all have a copy of the mobility element. So we're looking for, are all the topics covered? Are there any goals, policies, or actions missing? And should anything be revised or removed? So we'll be capturing all of that input tonight. So break into your groups and raise your hands if you have questions. We have folks here who can help. And just a reminder to the GPAC to definitely document your conversation, because I want to share that back so the public has a chance to understand what you were talking about.
And members of the public who are here, if you want to have conversations, please go outside because it's noisy. And then you can, of course, give comments as well. 1 minute warning. 1 minute remaining.
Are we? All right, so let's get started on sharing back what the key points of your group's conversation was about, some of the key themes. If you took notes as well, we'll be happy to accept some handwritten comments as well. And I think, Nick, you're on spokesperson for your group? All right, so we'll start over here and work our way around. About, if you can keep it under 5 minutes.
Okay.
5 minutes or less.
All right.
In the interest of time.
All right, you guys, pay attention. You know what I'm going to say is important. Okay. We had a great conversation. I think we really focused on the idea that the city has been essentially planned around cars. Everything is cars. Get your car, from here to there as fast as possible and find parking when you get there. And we were talking about the idea of, and I know some of this is happening, of making sure that we're planning where new residential goes in relationship to transit paths and how those paths can evolve over time. And for example, I live out near Kimball. I commute down Telegraph Road daily. And it's, I refer to these kinds of roads as traffic sewers. That's what they are. They are not attractive. They are not pleasant. They're not fun to drive on. And you can go fast. But there's been a phenomenon that's been happening for about 3 years now. They've been repairing and tearing up that road. And guess what? They've been narrowing us all down to one lane each way. And you know what? We're all getting where we need to go, and we're actually being kind to each other in the process. And it's been really interesting. And I bring that up because we talked about the idea of creating, at least in the law, creating a plan to have more Class 4 separated bike lanes throughout a network for our city. So when we look at transit corridors and transit paths, let's not just talk buses. There's a lot of lamenting that we've got buses driving around that are 2-3 people in them. Why is that? Because it's a hell of a lot easier to get in your car and go wherever you want to go, and we haven't planned around people living close to bus use in a convenient way. We also talked about, Sabrina mentioned that the students now are all commuting to school on their e-bikes. So, and we talked about the idea of studying the paths that they're using. Where are they going? And what if we were to make some of our earlier projects around creating Class 4 bike lanes for students to commute to schools on their e-bikes and scooters? And that becomes, a little more politically, perhaps, supportable, but it obviously isn't just going to be used by students. We talked about Foothill Road, and what a beautiful path that would be as a class 4 bike lane. I mean, it's a freeway right now. People go 50 miles an hour on that thing. We can slow people down a little bit and do something beautiful. So we know these are not short-term solutions, but I think that's part of the planning of this transportation. Oh, and of course, we got some issues with our freeways, the interchanges, particularly Johnson and Stanley, not just those, but the idea of rethinking how those things function and work and serve the community. There's a possibility of significantly modifying the Stanley interchange so that the patterning of the cars and how they're coming and going can evolve. But we'd like to see that made a priority. We know it's not going to happen fast.
Anything else to add from the group? You did that in 4 minutes. Nice. All right, how about who's speaking for CARBA?
I'll email this to y'all too, so you have it. But yeah, a lot of comments, so I'll try to go fast. Okay, so for goal M1, there were a handful of, what are these called, priorities that were still like a skosh car-centric. 1.7, limiting, limit right-of-way for vehicles. I wanted it rewritten, and I'll send that to you. Same goes for 1.14. The non-SQL operational traffic impact KPIs are all specific to vehicles, parking demand analysis, site distance analysis, collision analysis. I'm proposing that it should be, the project should provide equitable funding or infrastructure improvements to enhance pedestrian and bicycle facilities, safety, and overall connectivity. For 1.17, safety, I asked that speeding be specifically mentioned. And I had a brief conversation about pedestrian bulb outs specifically being called out. It's kind of like lumped within road diets, but like I think it increases visibility and it helps pedestrian crossing distances. 118, to Helen's earlier point, is nice. And then I added 2 goals, or no, sorry, I just added 1 additional one. Earlier on page 21 in the key considerations is access to the beach and ocean, but then it doesn't show up again in the goals and priorities. So I added improve walking and biking access to the beach and ocean, and I resurfaced the idea that we've discussed a lot, which is capping the freeway. So develop and design a connecting freeway cap for US 101. That then becomes an action item at the bottom to study capping the freeway. Then for 2.4, active transportation and connections, bicycle access and facilities should specifically talk about providing extensive and secure bike parking, repair stations, and storage facilities. So there's like a whole parking management, but that's car-centric, and we don't really talk about biking or micro-mobility parking within this. For parking management 2.8, there was just a phrase about parking permits being offered when requested by a majority of residents, and I just didn't really know what that process was or looked like, so that phrase was just confusing. For 2.10, to Sabrina's comment, educational opportunities should include subsidies and rebates for e-bikes. And then, yeah, I totally love the idea of like student-specific safe routes to school for e-bikes definitely should be included. And then for goal M4, in addition to the 4 that are existing in the priorities, I added 2, which I'll share with you. One is on car-free zones, the other is on density and land use synergy. We had a lot of conversations today about transit-oriented development, and I just added a priority that specifically speaks to a priority about, synergizing, aligning transportation and land use planning by prioritizing high-density mixed-use developments near transit hubs, blah, 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 which I can share. Then we added 4 action items. 1 was in the report, but not in the action items, which was study the feasibility of extending Metrolink to Ventura Downtown Beach Station, study capping the 101 freeway, studying shade at transit and bus stops, and And then there was 2 actions around extensions and connections for roadways and such, but there wasn't one for trails. So we wanted an action item on, specifically extensions and connections and connectivity for the trails for pedestrians and bikes.
So I noticed you said "I" a lot, but I'm assuming that meant you all concurred. You were just leading the charge on that. All right, got it. Anything else to add? You guys put a lot of, yeah. Somebody did their homework, right? All right. Who is speaking over here?
Okay, we ended up doing a lot of discussion about the West Side Olive and Ventura Avenue, and one of the things we had talked truck routes, concerns that limiting truck routes would go back to what we talked about earlier about limiting industry and how that would work together. So those need to be brought together. 3.5, and I don't have it written down. I just have a yes. So if anybody can help me out with. Oh yeah, move the Metrolink, study the feasibility about moving the Metrolink to downtown. Stanley Avenue off-ramp, that is on one of these policies. It's in there about Johnson Drive and California. It mentions them specifically, but does not mention Stanley. So please add that. 3.7 about. Sorry, I'm back and forth here. Multimodal transit facility. There was a recommendation or a suggestion to the city about having a transit hub at Ventura Avenue and Stanley, the old Edison site. Pursue that still. There's some hangups with Edison at the moment, but it can still be pursued. I believe the city's on it or agrees with it. 3.8 transit fleet renewals. I would add something about looking for grants. Continually look for grants to renew the fleet. And then one other. Oh, truck circulation under implementation, and then also VMT fees, mitigation fees program under implementation actions. This is more of a question. How would those fees be spent to look at that? Because right now all our traffic fees are going to one project in the city. So I'm just curious if those are going to be spent in the area where the fees are generated and not be tied to one project. And that's what I got. And you guys have anything else? Oh, one more thing.
I'm told that's a Jeff question. The answer to that one, on where the VMT fees get directed.
I think we would have a list of mobility projects that would include any roadway projects and also active transportation projects that we have listed in our ATP plan.
So there'd be a list of projects that those fees are tied to, sounds like.
Okay, and one more. This is, Doug wanted this one, he reminded me. Cap the freeway at California in that area down by the beach.
Great. Nope.
Have the design. And
What did you say?
I really, it's a perfect spot for a multimodal transportation center. A lot of us have been saying it now for 30 years. Everything begins with an idea and put down in a plan. And if you have that to point to when the funds do become available, because we could all say, where's the funds for these things? But there's a lot of things that we've created in the city without knowing where those funds are going to come from. But we have a good idea where the sources are. One last thing that we didn't talk about, but I want to mention is, I believe if we do the 126 to 101 southbound connection, that we actually go all the way to Harbor and to the harbor and work that out from a legal standpoint to go across that farmland so that we could, all the traffic that emanates off of Oxnard can then get right onto the freeway system and not go through our neighborhoods.
Do you have a question on that, Deepak? Oh, can you repeat that again?
Oh, Just that quickly is that it's the 126 westbound to 101 southbound connection that would alleviate and actually allow Victoria to be a real boulevard.
To create that connection, you're
Yes,
saying?
and then while you're working on and pointing to Caltrans to help support that, is connect all the way to the harbor, which is less than a mile to do so, and you get a lot of the traffic that will continue to grow coming out of Oxnard directly onto the freeway system without going through our neighborhoods. And we'll highlight the harbor as well, double win.
All right. Any thoughts from others based on any of the sharing back? Anything that anyone disagrees with? Kyler's go. Kyler, you want to add something?
Just one point on the capping the freeway idea, which came up with Doug and I think your group. Would designating the 101 as a state scenic highway potentially conflict with burying it underground, or not burying it, but?
I heard potentially. So that's definitely
if potentially, then I'm not very supportive of trying to designate them as scenic highways.
It's a good observation. You were saying potentially it could. Yep. Oh, here.
In my prior job for Supervisor Levere, I did explore scenic highways, in particular for the 150 between Carpinteria and Ojai, and it's beautiful in concept. It does have a lot of implications. It extends outside of that road boundary. It gets into private property rights, and it also affects different maintenance elements, in particular methodologies. So it would seem that, yeah, exactly. And so it would seem to potentially, there would be a bit of a disconnect with the CAP project and a scenic highway. And then there's also air rights of Caltrans, which are a whole another layer, if you will.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a question, just clarity on this one? So policy 5.1, state scenic highway designation, it sounds like that is not something the group is in support of because of the issue with 101 capping the freeway. Did I get that right?
It sounds like there's maybe some concerns that weren't maybe vetted yet. So
At the very least, to 5.1, adding a qualifier, like unless it conflicts with a capping goal.
or maybe it's explore designating the.
Well, if 101 was designated a scenic highway, would it be the whole highway? I mean, basically the whole highway starts down in LA and goes to who knows where, right? So or they sectionalize it?
You could go between specific mile markers, for sure. It doesn't have to be all the 101. It can be a portion of. You'll see it with the poppy sign, scenic highway.
Okay.
But it does, there have another layer of regulatory elements within that corridor.
Okay, because the thought of capping the 101 would be 5 blocks of downtown where it dips down and you have concrete walls on either side.
So maybe it's explore sections, portions of, designate portions of the road.
Just one thing, again, the unintended consequences, but very pertinent, especially tonight. The scenic highway designation could also interfere with vegetation management and being able to clear beyond the bare minimum required for fire prevention. So just something to consider.
So I think, exploring that designation in more detail maybe is appropriate. Any other comments on that? All right.
Anything else on mobility? Final questions, final thoughts? Well, Deepak is here.
And we talked briefly. The thing that we were talking about in our group was that this is a long game. This is not about next week or next month or even to some extent next year or the next 4 years. This is about the next 2 decades. And we are living in a community that was, as most of Southern California was, designed around everybody getting everywhere they need to go with a car. We get to have a 2,000-pound machine and take it with us wherever we go. And it's kind of hard to sort of get your head around that, but that's what we do regularly. That's our life. To begin to create a strategy that starts to take these streets and say, these are not streets for cars. These are streets where cars can be utilized when they behave themselves. And that what we really want is streets for bicycles and people and buses, and that it's all, you know, interconnected. And so to whatever degree we can begin to set up that strategy, recognizing that it's a 20-year strategy, that's what we should do. And my guess is things are going to happen between now and then that are going to kick that into a much higher gear, not unlike what the pandemic did to us and how it started to change some patterns before we had a chance to even know it was happening. And frankly, I'm really excited about it.
Thank you. Oh, that raised some other comments. Carba, then.
I just realized and remembered that in addition to the metro, the action item around extending the Metrolink to the downtown station, I would just like kill for like the opportunity to like take the train to Hollywood Bowl or to like a show in LA and like be able to come back. Like I hate driving south, and I want to like study like nighttime, like better, like just let us live in Ventura and like go party in LA, but like come back with the train. Like that's all I want.
Yeah, this was on my list, and I omitted it. More access to the Ventura River Trail from the west side, especially between like Riverside Drive and Stanley Avenue. It's been, I think it was mentioned in the last meeting, and it's been mentioned before, because we have a great trail, but half of the population can't get to it to really use it.
All right, David.
But speaking of trains, Metrolink is run by diesel trains. Is that true? Just for example, in the Bay Area, Caltrain goes from San Francisco to San Jose. They have just recently changed over to electric motors, which has expedited the trip by 20 minutes, and ridership is up 180% because of it. Because if you know anything about electric vehicles, you either accelerate or it decelerates for you. So it literally makes it faster to get up to speed and faster to get down to zero. So as this technology improves, we'll see faster times, which means more interest in ridership.
Thank you. All right, Matt, do we want to try to do that last item in the next 5 minutes, 4 minutes?
We have 3 minutes left. Just maybe we can spend a minute talking about the next 3 minutes and then the next meeting, which is on Wednesday night. So what we have left is the vision statement and the discussion about the direction with that. And then, which was supposed to be tonight, but we could put it off until the first part of the next meeting or the end of the next meeting. And then it's reviewing the land use goals, policies, and actions, so the land use policy framework and the public facilities and services policy framework. I guess I'm curious what this group wants to do as Doug yawns as I look in his direction about whether we end now and then move on.
I'm coming over to Scott first.
Since I have a stake in the game here, on the next agenda item, I would suggest we move that until Wednesday night's meeting and start the meeting off with that when we're fresh.
Okay, could we, should we limit the time on that conversation at the beginning of the meeting so we can make sure we get to the other topics? Which would be my recommendation, that we set a certain amount of time for it.
Yeah, I would go along with Scott's recommendation and then just ask everybody to review, Scott's vision and the revision and I want to thank you, Matt, for the marked up sheet. That made it very, very much easier to follow the changes in there.
And if you remember, we brought the vision statement back a few meetings ago because of the conversation about trying to remind everyone of where we started from that vision, and also just to see those few changes that the council had made. It has been endorsed or approved at the council level, so whatever changes are made would have to, again, go back to the council for that. So just to bear that in mind, too.
And just to say, it's potentially a little different because we did the vision statement over 3 years ago. And so, we've done a lot, we've talked a lot, and so it is time to look at the vision and say, does it still work? Are the concepts still there? So I would just encourage everyone that maybe we spend 20 or so minutes at the beginning of the meeting talking about the vision and the direction that you want to go. And this is really the kind of the two questions, which is move forward with Scott's version or go to the city council selected version. And then if it's, really the city council version, is there any high-level changes that need to be made? Please avoid wordsmithing unless there's a word that just is not appropriate. And then in terms of the other topics, the land use and the public facilities and services, please take some time to review those before. Even half an hour skimming through, I think would do a lot to come into the meeting. And then very quickly, we're hoping we can get through the topics at the next meeting. We have a fallback if we can't, but we're really hoping we can get through those 2 topics. Assuming we can, the next GPAC meeting is going to be a few months from now on the full draft general plan, and then one following that on the draft EIR. So we're really moving forward. You're seeing pieces of the general plan. You're not going to see every piece before it goes into the draft, but you will have an opportunity to look at the full draft together.
And it's 8:29. We'll adjourn the meeting.
Okay, good night.